In 1950, the acclaimed Japanese film director Akira Kurosawa released his masterpiece entitled Rashomon. Now, in Rashomon, the story goes, a samurai has been mysteriously killed. The four characters in the story give entirely different, conflicting reports of what happened. The samurai's wife says she was attacked by a bandit, fainted, and awoke to find the samurai dead. The bandit says he seduced the wife and then fought the samurai to an honorable death. The woodcutter who was working nearby said he witnessed the bandit's attack and the samurai's murder, but insists that he stayed out of it. And then the dead samurai's ghost appeared and says he killed himself. Now, you might expect that as the film goes along, the story would unfold and reveal to us which account was the true one. For we do so love tidy endings and mystery solved, don't we? Or do we? We're Unitarian Universalists, after all, who cherish having our answers questioned. But in his brilliance, Mr. Kurosawa does not, in the end, answer whether any of these versions of the same event is correct. Instead, he forces us to ask ourselves if there even is the possibility of a correct version of events. And so it is that the phenomenon of different people remembering the exact same story with contradictory accounts is called the Rashomon effect. Piles of data show that however much we groom and guard our memories, our recall of events is one of the most unreliable measures of what actually happened and what truth there might be. It turns out it's not difficult at all to implant false memories intermingled with true ones. Witness social media. And it turns out that every time we remember a story, and every time we tell a story from an event, we rewrite it just a little bit. And if there are errors in that telling, each time we retell it, we reinforce those errors until we convince ourselves that those things are actually true, absolutely correct, and this is the version of the event. Now, combine our unreliable memory with the fact that history is always written by the victors. And we've got the powerful potential for confusion at the very least and violent conflict at the worst. In the words of a proverb of the peoples of Benin, Ghana, and Togo, until the lion has its own storyteller, the hunter will always have the best part of the story. It is this wisdom that we in our age must follow. University of Binghamton historian Dr. Ann C. Bailey insists that if there is to be any hope of peace and reconciliation among the peoples of the earth, and most urgently among those of the Western Hemisphere, we must remember that until the lion has its own storyteller, the hunter will have the best part of the story. She says that the peace and reconciliation among the peoples of the world depends now on re-remembering our history, reshaping it with the perspective of the lived experiences of people who lived it but who were not in positions of power and privilege to keep the records. This re-remembering can only come now through education and through a deep commitment to the arts of listening and of humility to accept that our version is not the only one. So it is that historians and anthropologists cultural cultivars, artists, educators, and the spiritual and social guides of the 21st century are at work at the intersections of race and class and education, economics and religion and science to develop this art of remembering history and humanity through empowering the voices of those who lived it, who as yet have been unacclaimed, even unnoticed. We can do this with collective memory and also with individual memory. We can learn the art of remembering our own lives, our own histories, our own memories of events. However much we may have believed they are written in stone within us, they are not. We can learn this if we come to understand more about the place and the time and the people of a particular event and make a way to listen to them without prejudice. And if we can accept that our own selves, our very own recall, our very own version, the stories that we tell ourselves about what happened and who we are as individuals and as a people, if we can hold still a moment and listen and be humble enough to accept that we could be wrong. This weekend, we're asked to remember. We're asked to remember times and places and people who served this nation, its own history disrupted at this moment, and rightfully so. Disrupted by the urgent call to remember what we think our history tells us. To reawaken and reshape itself in light of its own devastating truths that have come to the surface again. For repentance of its sins of genocide and racism and sexism and poverty, asking if we can become willing to reform the systems of oppression and greed and cruelty we live within and reconcile with those whom those systems have devastated and devastate today, era upon era upon era into the 21st century. We were just in New York City, and our younger son loves to go to the Museum of Natural History. So we go there every single time. And you can go there every single time. You could go every day of your trip, and you still wouldn't see things that you saw the next time. And as we were leaving, there's a diorama, this huge wall-sized diorama of Native Americans offering fish to settlers. Looks happy, looks peaceful. And then there's a kind of a screen written across the glass that wasn't there the last time I was there. And it says, reconsidering this scene. And it acknowledges that this scene in no way shows the true history of what happened to the indigenous peoples of this country. That is a remembering, a reshaping what we have thought to be true after listening to people who lived it, whose voices were not heard. So how do we do all of this? It's a big thing. It's hard to do. We don't even realize how deeply ingrained some of these things are, the things that we're taught growing up under systems of privilege. First, we hold still. We reserve judgment. We open the gateways of our hearts and our minds, learning again to listen, set aside our own opinions, learn. This morning, as we observe this time of remembrance of those who have given their lives for the possibility of peace, if we are to attain it, we must first remember. We are very honored and blessed this morning that members of this beloved community, both active military and veterans, have brought their voices to this most tender and tenacious moment we share today.
This is a poem called Called by Loss, Called by Peace by Heather K. Junolese. come this day called by war, by the suffering we inflict and endure, when minds across borders fail to reason and compromise. It's okay. I lost a lot of friends. I can't even remember their faces anymore. Okay. When minds across borders fail to reason and compromise, we come this day called by loss, the depths of those who serve in our name, those whose lives end before the natural course, in service to a cause greater than their own. We come this day called by hope that we will, in some season, finally surrender our swords for plowshares, and we come this day called by peace. May we hear its song, may we proclaim its promise, may our remembrance today renew a struggle we can never stay or rest.
We can never stay or rest till that day peace will come. And while knowing full well we'll not likely see that day in our lifetimes, we take to heart the words of the great theologian and philosopher Reinhold Niebuhr, who tells us, "Nothing that is worth doing can be achieved in our lifetime. Therefore we must be saved by hope. Nothing which is true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history. Therefore, we must be saved by faith. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we must be saved by love. No virtuous act is quite as virtuous from the standpoint of our friend or foe as it is from ours. And therefore, we must be saved in the final form of love, which is forgiveness, until that day that peace shall come."
The Last Soldier by David M. Horst. I saw the parade pass by with the last soldier marching. I saw politicians stand by, not in pride, but in shame, as they recited the names of the dead and admitted their failure. I saw the marching band step in time to silence. No more hymns of glory could they play. I saw mothers and fathers say, "No, I will not sacrifice my child on the altar of nation's pride." I saw flags no longer madly waved, but held in quiet reverence. I saw the granite statues crack and crumble, symbols to the waste of war. I saw the last soldier give his final salute, and the trumpeter play taps one last time. I saw the end of brutality and death. I saw the graveyard flags turned to threads by the ceaseless wind.
We will read together now. We remember them. And we ask that your response after us be, we remember them. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them.
In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter,
We remember them.
In the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring.
We remember them.
In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer.
We remember them.
In the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn.
We remember them.
In the beginning of the year and when it ends.
We remember them.
When we are weary and in need of strength.
We remember them.
When we are lost and sick at heart.
We remember them.
When we have joys we yearn to share.
We remember them.
So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are part of us as
We remember them.
Remembering Well by Paul Sawyer. The first time I ever played taps was at summer camp when I was 10 years old. That was the year I started playing trumpet, so I can only imagine how it sounded. No way I could have hit that high note near the end. First time I played taps in honor of those who had died was in high school when a local Legion commander called and asked if I could occasionally come to play taps at the grave site, services for veterans, and I agreed. For the next couple years, when there was a need, I took my place with the Legion Honor Guard and played the simple 24 notes of taps as best I could. Each time, the Legion commander would quietly slip me a $10 bill. And that's about all taps meant to me. For a while, as an easy chance to get out of school and earn some money. And then one day, that changed. The man I was called upon to play for that day was a World War II veteran and the father of one of my Boy Scout leaders. That day, as I began to play taps, this man, who I knew as a wise and kind and relatively hard in the old Boy Scout wilderness leader sort of way, he fell to his knees, overwhelmed with tears. Not sure how I made it through the whole piece that day, but after that I thought I might never be able to play taps again. Once upon a time, taps was a signal that the camp was relatively safe. It meant that you were not under siege or under attack of any kind. It meant that you were reasonably sure that there were no enemy soldiers to worry about, at least a bugle call's distance away. To a whole camp of soldiers, the notes of taps meant that unless you were on duty, you could close your eyes and sleep in peace. I didn't know that story or that sentiment all those years ago when I played taps for pocket money in the local cemetery. Today, whether I'm playing it or hearing it, taps means something closer to what it once meant. Today, it speaks to me in my heart and soul about dying, and for those of us who remain, about remembering well.
Are there others among us who have served that we may honor at this time? If you wish, please rise. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Zena. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Linda. You can just stand here and let us love you for a minute.
That is what I hide.
We come this day called by loss of those who gave their lives in service to a cause greater than our own. Called by hope that we will, in some season, finally surrender our swords for plowshares. We come this day willing to learn the art of remembering, that the voices of those written in twisted histories or written out all together may reshape our understanding of who we are in light of who we've been, that our yearning for justice may be reconciled and our souls restored. We come this day called by peace, that our remembrance today may renew our struggle, that we may not rest nor cease until the last soldier gives their final salute, and the trumpeter plays taps. One last